Former Sea Org member Katherine Olson spent a lot of time in Scientology's Division 6, the same division I was posted in as Director of Public Book Sales in London. It's the public-facing part of Scientology that aims to bring new people in to sell books to raise awareness of Scientology, so I thought it would be really interesting to have a talk to her about what it was like day to day in her org versus my org, how we did things in London versus how things are done over in the States, and also how things like the pandemic affected our activities in Scientology. I left before the pandemic, she left after, so she has a little bit more experience about that and how things changed. So stay tuned and see you guys very soon. Hi, Katherine. Welcome back
Hi.
to my channel. Round 2, a week later.
Right.
How have you been over the last week?
I've been great. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. Hopefully, using StreamYard now, our audio should be a bit better because our last video was fine, but I think I was a bit quiet. So hopefully this
Oh,
one
yeah.
comes
Yeah.
out a bit better. But I don't know if you've seen the response on that video. There's been so many people commenting, saying they love your story and how you should have your own YouTube channel.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, I'm not gonna do my own channel, but I'll come on. I'll talk to you. I'm supposed to go and talk to Claire again, Aaron. I'd like to go on Mike's channel. He's fascinating to talk to. So yeah, I'll just bounce around.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, there's starting your own channel is a whole thing in and of itself. You know,
I'm
it's a whole
sure.
task. It can take over your life. So, you know, speaking out and sharing your story, you can do that on other people's channels, you know,
Yeah.
without the
Yeah.
stress.
Yeah. And I enjoy
So,
talking about it, and a lot of people are interested. There's so many people who've never been in Scientology and that are very interested in what happened and what's still happening and what's being done about it. So
yeah, and
whatever I
I'm
can
really
help.
I'm really excited to talk a bit more in depth. You know, last time we talked about ethics and PTSness, and we went through my declare and all of that. And
Mhm.
there's lots of people who, you know, your story is out there if people want to hear about how you got in and out. We covered it a little bit in the last episode, but I'm really interested in delving a bit deeper into the crux of what actually Scientology is and what it's like to be involved and be on staff and be in the Sea Org.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited to start talking about that stuff. Like today, we're going to talk about Div 6, right? So both of us were posted in public facing roles. I was selling books and you were the public promo, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're in charge of all the promo activities of the org, and I think there's a really interesting conversation to be had about that. So, do you want to start off and tell us a bit more about your time in the org in the Div 6 role and how you got into that?
Sure. Sure. First of all, and I was just thinking this is working in a class 5 org, in the role of what we'll call class 5 staff member, and that's just the type of organization it is. It's not a Sea Org organization, and I'll just go with the fact that anyone who's watching this channel is probably watching Aaron and Mark and all these guys, so they already have like a general understanding what we're talking about.
Sure. And a Class 5 org is a sort of city level org like London or
That's right.
Birmingham or,
That's
uh,
right.
you know, where any public can walk in and start their journey on Scientology. They don't deliver
That's
like the
right.
high levels of Scientology, the OT levels and stuff. That's done
Exactly.
elsewhere.
Exactly. And it's very different from working in a Sea Org because every Sea Org that you'd work in, it has its own, it's like its own organization. You have, you have apartments with other Sea Org members. You have, your building is totally, it's not, unless you're a service organization. I worked in management for many years, so it's not like we had a lot of public coming in, especially raw public, people that never heard of Scientology before that just coming in. So it was a very different experience. So yeah, so I was working in, like you said, Division 6, public facing. I was doing the promotion. I was doing book sales for about half the week, and then the other part I would be working on different promotional actions. I was running newspaper ads. I did TV. I did internet ads. I did all sorts of things in an effort to get people interested in coming into the organization. Because what's I'll just say interesting, kind of stupid actually, about the ideal org strategy is that in L. Ron Hubbard policy specifically says you should have your organization somewhere where a lot of people are going to walk by and see it, and it's easy to just go and stand outside and say, hey, do you want to come in and take a personality test, buy a book, whatever. Like, it's easy to just get people to walk in and check it out, right? So with this new ideal org strategy, a lot of the orgs are being moved to like sort of remote locations in town, or maybe just outside of town, or in a part of town that doesn't have anything around that people are going to necessarily walk to. Like in Columbus, we were in an area that we had a TV station across from us. We had an air conditioning repair place right next to us. It was all this like super specialized things that somebody might drive to, but they're not going to drive to this place. So they just be like, oh, I'll check out this place across the street. Plus, there was no sidewalk outside the building. Yeah, that's right. No sidewalk.
So you had to drive there to get there. You couldn't just be walking past and think, oh, I'll just pop in and see what that's about. That's you have to go there as a destination.
Yeah. We had a really big parking lot. I mean, that was...
Was it empty most of the time?
Yeah. Yeah. Two level parking. Like there was like one level, and then you go down a little bit and there's another. It's a huge parking lot.
Wow.
Because apparently that was one of the things the existing public in that when they were in the other org, which was right downtown, they always used to complain about there's no place to park because it was right downtown, right? So of course you want to handle parking. You want to handle parking over getting people inside the org, or being in a place where people are just going to walk by and go in the org. And we actually started using, because the org still owned the building, the old building downtown. And so we actually started using that to sell books and do
like a test center, like we have here in London with Tottenham Court Road.
It was like a little makeshift thing, because you could go and there's a lot of people walking around downtown, and you just go and bring people in and do the whole stress test thing. So should we explain the stress test?
Yeah, I think I went over it a bit in detail in a previous video in terms of the stress test pattern and how we use it to sell books. But I think in a nutshell, it's just a way of selling the Dianetics books. So we would set up a table with chairs and someone with an e-meter, and we would get people to come along and say, hey, come and find out more about yourself, or find out what's, causing stress in your life. And then you would I go through the pattern in another video, the exact technique that we use using the e-meter to locate areas of stress in someone's life. And then we put the Dianetics book in their hands and present that as like a solution to their problem, right? But that's not something you're going to be doing in an org that doesn't have any footfall, right?
That's right.
You're going to be doing that.
That's right. So then you'd have to go. So then we would go to different places around downtown where you could just set up a table, and you're not going to get in trouble for not having a permit or whatever. We'd set up a table and we just start selling from there, right? But this only the org was only open. We opened in November 2019, so we had November, December. And it's getting really cold. It was already pretty cold when we arrived. So as far as people like walking around, it wasn't a lot of people walking around. And if it wasn't like they would want to stop and have a whole conversation about buying a book. But like I said, we did use the old org premises a few times.
How many of you were there on, not necessarily in Div 6 as a whole, but when you talk about going out doing stress tests and going out selling books, how many of you were there doing this at one time, staff members?
We would have anywhere from like 8 to 10 people doing it.
Really? Wow.
Sometimes less. Sometimes it was just Div 6A staff. Sometimes we'd get most of Div 6 involved. We had a whole thing going on where there'd be various people in the org that would go out. Like almost everyone in the org at one point was going out at least once a week. but
You
that kind
guys did a better job than I did. I mean, we had a real big uptake in London. People loved going out book selling, and we were quite a young org in terms of the age of the staff, so it was quite a social thing, and we usually had a good turnout. We went every week, but people who were auditors or working in treasury or DSEM or any other division that's not necessarily as public facing as the
yeah,
Div 6 ones, it was harder to get them out. They would always come out when we had a bookathon. So every year, just to explain the birthday game a bit, every year for Elron Hubbard's birthday in March, all of the orgs around the world would compete to, do the best that they can in terms of their statistics. And one of the key statistics is book sales. So the org that sells the most number of books in a year will win an award and a trophy,
yeah.
and it's talked about in the event. And every year there would be a bookathon where for a week, or is it a week or a month? I think it was a week,
It
wasn't
was
it?
a week, yeah,
Where all of the orgs would have to try and slam book selling, and we'd compete, and there'd
and
be a
do as many, yeah,
leaderboard, and we'd
that's
go
right,
head to head. And during those weeks, because it's a competition, a friendly competition between different orgs, we would get loads of people from across the org in to come sell
yeah,
books, and we'd have maybe 20 people or something out on a stress test booth. But
yeah.
on an average week, we definitely wouldn't have 10 people. So you guys did better than I did.
Yeah, we actually won the bookathon. I think we won it twice in a row.
Wow.
Yeah, because there was like it happened more than once in the year. So we won the first one, and that's where we had like everyone in the org was out doing it, and we had like multiple tables in different parts of town and whatever, and then you'd have, and then that even wasn't enough to like sell enough books. So then you'd have, because of the way the organization was put together, almost nobody on staff was from Columbus. They were from LA, they were from New York, they were from Clearwater, from Flag, all different people. So they had communication lines all over the US and some of them all over the world. So literally we had one Italian girl who used to call her husband, who was on a project in Italy, and get him to sell books for her for the bookathon. I'm not kidding.
No.
And then we had another with actually the PES's father.
PES is Public Executive
The public
Secretary, so
exec,
they're the person in charge of Div 6, right?
right. So she got her father to buy a beginning books package, or gets one of his friends to buy a beginning books package. And it was just like all sorts of things like this. So it looks like, so if you look at it from like a management viewpoint, you're like, wow, they're contacting all these people in Columbus, and there's all the, wow, they're really selling books in Columbus. No. Half of those were outside of the city, and many were outside of the US even. But
That's
counted.
the thing, is the stat isn't necessarily selling books in London or Columbus. It's
That's
sold
right.
by the org. So, but we had a similar thing. For some reason, there's a mission in Malta, and for some reason, it was London org's mission. So we were the ones running it. And I think I never went. I was very close to going. I got a CSW approved to get me to fly over there and go book selling. But from what I gather, it was one lady who used to live in London and then moved over to Malta and started a mission. And
Yeah.
it's just her living room that's open once a week. And she goes book selling with a friend. They would only ever have 1 or 2 books sold a week. But
Yeah.
that was one of London's missions. And so every book that was sold in Malta was my stat, even
That's
though I'm
right.
in London. So
Yeah.
it's not
Right.
geographic, it's actually based on like the org that sells the books.
Yeah. And then if you have, then when you have an org like there's an org in Taiwan, for example, and they have 20, 30 some odd missions just in Taiwan.
Do they?
And so when it comes time for the bookathon, they can count the book sales of all of these missions.
That's crazy. I had no idea. How come there are so many missions in Taiwan?
I don't know. They just somehow got things going, I guess. I don't know. I don't know how it's doing now, but I know that there was anywhere between like 20 or 30 missions or something, and some of them are pretty big too.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think that's actually a conversation to be had about different sort of ethnic groups being interested in Dianetics,
Yeah.
because I don't know if it was the same for you, but in London, the typical middle class white London banker or lawyer who
Yeah.
lives or works near where the org is not going to be interested in Dianetics or
That's
Scientology
right.
because they know what it is. They've heard the black PR. So if I was to walk up on the street to anyone near the org, hey, would you like a stress test or can I sell you a book? They're just going to go, no, I'm not interested, because they have already heard about Scientology, or it
That's
comes
right.
across like, oh, you're a cult or whatever. So we would actively go to areas that are populated with people who are not of that demographic. So we would
We
go
did the same
sitting on
thing.
Open
Yeah. Yeah.
Road, which is a really high Arabic population area, and people who don't speak English or do speak English, but it's not their first language. And so we would set up the stress test booth with Arabic copies of
That's
Dianetics
right. Yeah,
rather
because
than English.
Dianetics is translated in 50 languages.
Yeah, precisely. So we would try and target demographics that haven't heard too much
Yeah,
about
that's
Scientology
right.
so that
We
we could
did
get
the
the
same
book
thing.
sales. Was it the same for you in
We
Columbus?
sold, yeah, we used to go there. It's Columbus is actually interesting in this fact that they have all these little pockets of like these like ethnic type areas. I don't know if I'm saying the politically correct term, but whatever. But they have like little pockets where it's like a kind of like a strip mall type thing, but almost everyone in that strip mall is Somali or Nepalese or whatever, and it's really interesting. You get to talk to I got to talk to so many interesting people. Oh my god, it was actually really cool.
Yeah.
But it's true because um, we sold a lot to Somalians, we sold a lot to Nepalese people, we sold Arabic, we sold, trying to think of all the different, there was a couple key ones. There's a very large Somali population there. It's a very large Nepalese population. We even started selling in Cincinnati because
What?
we, and yeah, so there's an org in Cincinnati. But apparently they don't go to like the north end of town or something, and so somebody had the idea to start going to Cincinnati selling
That's
books.
so funny. I mean, we didn't really have much of that in, like, because at the time I was on staff, London was the only ideal org. So in the UK, there was Saint Hill, which is the UK headquarters, and then there was London, and that was it. I mean, there are small orgs in Edinburgh, Birmingham, Manchester, Plymouth,
Yeah,
and Sunderland, but they are really small, almost like missions. They were counted as orgs, but they weren't ideal. They only had a handful of staff. So
right.
they were never really competition for London. So we were always considered pretty much the only org in the UK. So we
Wow.
didn't really have much competition in terms of geographic area. So wherever we went book selling, we could go. But London is huge anyway.
Yeah,
We could sell to anyone we wanted anywhere in London to be absolutely fine.
yeah, and it's interesting with these people because a lot of these people they don't go on the internet very much, and even if they do, it's like I don't know how many like translated like if someone who chiefly speaks like Nepalese is like their first language, they're not going to necessarily be interested in going online and seeing a bunch of things in English. And I don't think there's very many people who are speaking about Scientology like we are, who are speaking in Nepalese. So it's
I
just
can
not
imagine being
a
in a
thing.
foreign, if Nepalese is your main language and you've just moved here or you're not really exposed to that community, just seeing a book in your own language in itself would interest
Exactly.
you and think, oh wow,
Exactly. Yeah.
this book is in my
Yeah.
language, therefore I'm a bit more interested than
Yeah.
if it was in English, right?
That's right. That's right. They really like that too.
So, what other promo activities did you do? Because your job was to, as you say, doing book ads and magazine ads and that sort of thing. What was the day to day like for you, other than going book selling? You said you did that about half the time. What was the
Yeah,
other?
day to day was setting up like what are the next newspaper ads I'm going to do. I used to go online and find any sort of like free way to run ads where you didn't have to pay. You could do a bunch of online ads. I used to do that. And I used to, let's see, I had TV. I had like TV and a lot of TV and internet ads going on right after the org opened, because what happens is when an org opens, it gets a large amount of money to do promotion, to like get the org well known and stuff, and they give you get pre-made ads from management that are supposedly based on surveys, but I have my doubts because it didn't seem to be well surveyed. So I was doing a bunch of that before the pandemic. And I used to also, actually, after the pandemic, we got into doing Meetup. And we would do it in such a way, because you can't mention Scientology. You can't mention like a specific church or something on Meetup. That's not the point. The point is not to get people to come to your church. The point is to have groups meeting up, like a hiking group or a sewing group or whatever. So we'd have like um, how to improve relationships meetup.
Oh my god! And what was that hosted at the org?
Yeah,
Come and
that's
talk about
right.
how to improve relationships.
Yeah, but
Location:
we
Church of
wouldn't even put on
Scientology.
there. We wouldn't even put on there Church of Scientology. We would just put the address, or we'd put a phone number, and we wouldn't even put. Get this, we wouldn't put the phone number of the org. We would put a cell phone number of one of the Div 6 staff. So
No,
it'd be like this whole like,
that's
you're like tricking
hilarious.
people. It's like bait and switch, right? And they're
That's
like,
hilarious.
"Oh, I didn't know I was coming to the Church of Scientology." "Oh no, it's okay. We're not, And we try to handle them once they got there. And some people, when they arrived, were like, "Nope," and they go away. And some people are like, "Okay, fine," and they listen to
Wow.
a lecture, like someone would like give a lecture on the book and then talk about it and do this whole thing. And sometimes it worked. We got some course starts off of it. I don't think we got anyone who continued on. Like maybe somebody would buy a book or do a course, and then they would just kind of fizzle off and be like, "Okay, fine, I'm done with that," type thing.
We used to do two similar things. Well, we did one thing that's quite similar with Dianetics seminars. We would promote every week on a Wednesday at 1 o'clock. There's a Dianetics seminar, and we'd publish it on social media and all sorts and promote it as a seminar to find
Yeah,
out more about yourself. And we'd
yeah,
use these different keywords. Um, but no one would ever show up. We would never, some days we wouldn't even have someone there to deliver the seminar because we
yeah,
knew that no one was going to show up. So if anyone did show up on a day where we weren't ready for it, we would kind of be, shooting ourselves in the foot. But we never really got any attention. There was one time we did a in fact, the whole time I was there, we would pay, I don't know if you did this, we would pay a distribution company to give out flyers. So we would have flyers
Oh no, we
either
did that
sent.
ourselves.
Did
I
you?
did
So
that myself. I used to do thousands of flyers myself.
I think because we didn't have enough staff or something, or we had some excess money or whatever, we would pay someone, not like a big company. I think it's just like probably a Scientologist who has a
Yeah,
company they set up, and we would pay them and give them those personality tests or flyers or something. They would go and deliver them to 10,000 households or something every week.
yeah.
And on top of that, we would be handing out flyers and so on ourselves. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
don't
I
know
don't.
what your rules are like or your laws in the UK, but here you can't just go and put something on someone's property without a specific permit. You can't put things in people's mailboxes. That's a big no. That's
Really? No,
no,
you can totally do that here.
sorry.
Like it's totally legal for you to just have 1,000 flyers printed and just go and drop them into everyone's letterboxes in the
Yeah.
area because you're promoting something. Because
Yeah, see, we may have done that if we were a little bit more out there, but because we were a Sea Org, we had very strict, like the DSA, Director of Special Affairs, would be like all over that. She's like, "No, you better find out what the law is about that before you
that's
do
so
anything."
interesting. Because the Sea Org members, so we in London Org, we had 3 or 4 Sea Org members posted permanently, and they weren't in public facing roles, but there was one guy who I probably won't name um, publicly, but he is no longer in the Sea Org, but he's still a Scientologist. But he would come out book selling with us every week, and he used to love it. I think it was kind of an escape because it means he can get out of the org for a couple of
Right?
hours and have a bit of
Yeah, we
fun.
had stuff like
Um,
that too.
but he was probably the most um not dodgy is not the right word, but you know, if there's a rule, how do we slightly bend the rules to
Right,
do it? Being
right,
cheeky is the
right.
word. And
Yeah.
he was more cheeky than anyone else, because
Yeah,
even
and
though
you
he was a
probably got more
SEAL,
promotion out too. We had like every step of the way it was like, oh, make sure you can do that. Make sure
we
it's okay. Like I used to do stuff all over Ohio State University. I used to do promotion. I used to go I went into every single building in the university because you could just walk in, everything was open. And it's a huge campus. So you could just walk in the building, find a bulletin board and just put up a poster. And we
wow.
had these posters that had like this little tear off thing at the bottom where it's like you have the phone number of the org. You have the poster, then you have a thing you could take so you have the number. And I think we got maybe 2 people come in off of all the like hundreds of posters I put up all over the place. But I made sure to keep doing it because see, that was the way that I eventually watched everything that I watched and talked to everyone I talked to. Because I arranged it so I was doing that by myself for like 2 days a week, half the day or the entire day, just going around the campus doing that.
Yeah, and you can listen to podcasts or do whatever
Yeah,
you want while you're
that's
doing
right.
that, right?
That's right.
Yeah. We used to be really cheeky with things like book selling. So in London, you have to have a permit from the local authority in order to do sales on the street. So technically, you're not supposed to just rock up on the side of the street, put up some tables and start selling books. You have to apply for a permit, which
Right.
usually is only 20 or 30 pounds, is not expensive, and 9 times out of 10 you would get it. But it's just a hassle because you have to apply and it takes ages for them to get back to you, and you have to declare all the income and all of this, and it's a whole process. So we generally wouldn't do that because it's just too much hassle. So we
Yeah.
would we'd do 2 things. First of all, find spots where we know the council don't come round and do checks, so we know that we're not going to get kicked off. And other places, there was a place we used to go to right outside Shepherd's Bush train station that we knew we weren't allowed to sell books at, but
Wow.
we also knew that the wardens are only around at certain times of the day, and if they find you doing it, all they'll do is tell you to stop and you have to pack up and leave. There's
Yeah.
no legal repercussions.
Yeah.
So we would just be really cheeky and just try and get away with it for as long as possible in all these places. And when we
Yeah.
get told to pack up, we would be like, yeah, no problem, okay. And then take our time packing up. And meanwhile, we're still selling books.
Yeah.
And then we have to
Wow.
wait for the car to come and pick us up. And
Yeah.
just to try and get an extra hour out of it. And we would then not go there for another couple of weeks, because if we showed up every week there, they would just shut us down immediately. But
Right.
we would be quite cheeky in bending the rules just to be able to sell books. Did you do
Right.
anything like that in Columbus?
We tried to do a few things, and then when the DSA found out or whatever, she'd be like, "No, you have to get a permit. You have to do this. You have to do that." And we'd be like, "Oh my god, get over yourself." But
This
there was,
kind of links up to
yeah.
what you were saying the
Sorry,
other day,
my
actually, about.
power is kind of
Oh,
low here. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, good.
you're right.
Yeah.
This actually links into what we were talking about the other day, about the reputation of London internationally and the UK. Do you want to maybe tell the audience a bit more about what you said about how London and the UK is perceived over this
Oh
over
yeah.
the.
When I was in management, it was kind of like you're okay. So you're trying to manage all these different areas, and you have continental offices. You have one in Africa. You have one in Australia. You have one in Canada in Toronto. You have one in Denmark. You have one in New York. You have one in Mexico City. And you have one in the UK. And then you have one in Western United States in LA. So, and generally, like when you're running a program, or you're trying to get everybody to do blah blah on some program, like say it's a recruitment program, so you're trying to get them to send out this amount of promo every week or something, and you're trying to get everybody to do this, you're trying to get all these different areas to get their orgs to do this. So generally everybody would be, a lot of them be sort of compliant or whatever about doing it, but then sometimes you'd have the UK, and the UK like to do like the opposite from the rest of the world. And I think it's because there's a bit of a thing like, you know, this is where Saint Hill is, and this is it's kind of a special place, or they think it's a special place or whatever. And I think that's why that was.
But how do they get away with it? Because any other territory that is non-compliant or going against orders or doing their own thing, you know, David Miscavige or whoever in management would come down and hit the hammer down and sort them out and get them back in line. But that never seemed to happen with the UK. We kind of seem to get away with doing our own
Yeah,
thing.
it's just I don't actually know. I don't actually know how how they did that, but it just seemed to be that they just tried to do the opposite of what everyone else was doing.
There was definitely an unwritten, not rule, but method of operating in London Org that was, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission.
Right.
In that, if we wanted to go and do something and we knew we would probably be told no, it's
Yeah.
better to just go and do it and then show the results. So
Right.
one thing that we used to do, well, social media is a bit of a no-no when it comes to Scientology and Scientologists. International management want to have overall control of the message that Scientology portrays and puts
That's
out
right.
there. So they kind of don't really want you going off and doing your own thing and having an Instagram page for your org or a Facebook page or
Yeah.
whatever.
Even
But
though it might reach more people and get more people interested, and there's all sorts of ways to reach people now, it's they try to regulate it so much. I know from it was very frustrating for us because I mean we were told a lot of stuff that we couldn't do because we were Sea Org members. Like we couldn't put ourselves on social media, we couldn't do various things like that. So
absolutely. And I came in as the director of public book sales, and kind of being quite tech savvy, I was thinking, this is stupid. If we want to sell loads of books, social media is the cheapest, easiest way of reaching
that's right.
people to sell
Yeah.
books,
Yeah.
because you can pay to have an advert in a newspaper or a, you know, whatever, but you can put posts out on social media and they reach people for free. It's like a free billboard, but also you can pay to boost things, and you know, it's cheaper than other forms of advertising,
Right.
and it's just an easy way to reach lots of people. So I asked Charlie Wackley, who we spoke about before, he was my senior. I asked, is it possible to start a Facebook account for the Church of Scientology London or Dianetics London, whatever we want to call it, so we can start selling books? And he said, right, if I ask, they will say no. So I think the best thing to do, because I completely get what you're saying and I agree, I think we need to do it and very quickly get results, so that when they find out or when we tell them, we have evidence to prove that it's worked and we've got book sales from it.
Right.
So we kind of under the radar, I started this Dianetics London page on Facebook, and we got a couple of hundred likes and followers, and we started this Scientology London Instagram, and Charlie loved it. He actually, after I left, became a bit of a influencer in the Scientology world on Instagram. He's appeared a lot in Mike Rinder's blog and Tony Ortega's and so on, doing videos and pictures of
Yeah.
what it's like to be on staff in London Org, and that all stemmed from a conversation I had with him of what it is we are and aren't allowed to do. And we just thought, how can we play it safe? And we said, okay, let's just use LRH. So we can put LRH quotes from books up there, we can put pictures, and we
Yeah.
didn't write any of our own text. We just used stuff that was already on the website or pre-approved, so that there was nothing they could tell us off for, because we've only used stuff that's already out there, but
Yeah.
we're using it to try and target the London community. So anyway, we did this and we didn't get in trouble for it. And actually, after I left, it carried on, and they still have their own Instagram page. And I think other
Yeah.
orgs have followed suit. And I think they got wind of it. And now there's a bit of a push to have your own Instagram page and so on. But it all started, I don't think any other org had done it, as far as I'm aware, before London. But I think it all just started from that UK mentality in Scientology of, let's just do it. And if we get told off, then fine, but at least if we've got the results, we can say, well, actually it's suppressive to stop us doing it because we've reached 1,000 people in the last week,
Yeah,
so therefore
yeah,
you can't tell us not to do it, right?
yeah, exactly. That's interesting. Yeah, we had a Facebook page for the org too that the DSA used to control, and we had Instagram, which a lot of it was done by the DRPR in Div 6, but she was like a trusted person who she was in the Sea Org for a while, and she used to be in the CMO and all this stuff. So it's like, okay, well, we trust her with social media type thing. So
This is one of the crazy things she said to me previously. You were in charge of, you were director of promotions, right? Promotional activity.
right.
And yet you didn't have access to the social media
That's
pages,
right.
right?
100% correct.
Where's the logic in that?
It's not logical. Nothing's logical about that. Which is why when we all went under lockdown with the pandemic thing in March 2020, I started my own. I just made like a generic Facebook page, just so I could see the org's Facebook page, and I could see other orgs' Facebook page, and I could be like, oh, okay, what else can I do with this promotion wise to like reach more people?
With good intentions, right?
Yeah,
See
yeah,
what other people are doing and what you can learn from it.
yeah.
What was your statistic? So in Scientology, for those of you who don't know, if you're a staff member, you have at least one statistic that you're in charge of, and that's how your productivity and your how good you are at your job is measured by the statistics. So for me, my stat was MBS Raw, number of books sold to raw public, as in people who aren't already Scientologists. So every week I'd have to give in my stats and I'd plot it on a graph, and that would chart how good or bad I'm doing at my job, and thus determine whether or not I have to do any ethics actions if my stats have gone down or whatever.
Right.
What was your stat as director of promo?
Mine was Div 6 promo, which just meant it was any flyer or handout or poster that was put up. And then I had another one which was ads run, amount of ads, like number of ads run. So I would be out handing out promo myself for a large part of the week. Pre-pandemic, there was different sports games going on, so we would get like 20 staff to go half an hour before the game started and just hang around on the streets and hand out promo to people. And then I had the bright idea to also do it after the game when everyone came out. So that's what we would do. And then when that all ended for several months because of the whole pandemic fiasco, we weren't doing any of that because everything had shut down. And so when we did finally go back in the org, I was going into shops all over the city, and I was basically taking little stacks of promo and being like, oh, hey, can I leave this promotion for a book in here?
Just leave it on the counter.
And
How was
like, oh yeah, go ahead. And some people had a little place where they'd have like different promotion that people wanted to leave, and some people would say no way, and it just depended.
And how was it being on staff at the very beginning? You know, we're talking 2019, 2020 here, where things were starting to close down and people weren't coming into the org and the whole world was shutting down because of this pandemic thing that's happening. But in Scientology, if your stats don't go up each week, you have to do certain things ethics-wise to try and resolve that issue. And I just wonder what it was like being on staff at that time, because we all know that
when all the stats were crashing.
Yeah, everyone's stats are crashing because we're being locked down. It's completely understandable. We know it's going to happen. It's not preventable. Preventable? Yeah, preventable.
Yeah.
But what was it like for you? Did they assign lower conditions and things to you?
No. Like for me personally, it was just like everybody understood. Yeah, you can't be doing promo. Like even when it started to be like, oh, social distancing, the whole thing started going on. We were still doing promo, and then we had some people who called in or came in and were like, why are you doing this? Like this is totally not okay, and you shouldn't be doing this. And then
What, as in people from up lines, like in Scientology, or
no,
just public people?
like just public people,
Right.
non-Scientologists, or it created a problem, created a PR problem. So then the DSA was like, okay, well, you can't be handing out promo. I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? So I was still doing ads. I was still doing a few things like that. They were still selling books all the way up until the org closed and everyone went to the apartments. But up until the day that the org closed and things had gotten pretty serious. I mean, the ED was always saying like I don't want to hear this thing on, I don't want to hear this thing on this disease that's going around. This is not the why for your stats being down, and the usual. This is the usual of what is happening. Actually, in reality, is not why it's not the reason for it.
There's this big disease going around, pandemic situation, everything's going to lockdown, and people are dying in the thousands, and therefore everything's closing. People are being legally stopped from going into places like the Church of Scientology. But that's not the reason people aren't coming into the org.
That's not the reason that the staff has been down and that we're not getting people into the org. You just need to up your intention.
You need to be OT about it.
Have more intention.
Oh my God, that's insane. So what was so like, in that period between you not being able to do promo and giving out flyers and stuff, between that time and when the org closed, which I'm guessing is only a couple of weeks, right? What did you do day to day during that time?
I was doing a lot of stuff online, however I could. Like I was running ads online, I was running internet ads, I was doing whatever I could inside. Yeah.
And then I
think I may have gone out a few times on book selling. Oh, and I was going to the campus, to the Ohio State University, and I was still doing posters, putting posters around. I wasn't handing things to people, I was just putting posters up.
Right. And then the org closed, and you're obviously a Sea Org member, so you still have to work your however many hours a day, 7 days a week, but you can't do your normal job of promo because that's not the thing, and the org is closed, so you can't promote an org that you can't go to. How did your day job change? What were you expected to do every day?
I did emails. We had this system where if somebody wrote in and they were like, every org has a system where if someone sends something online and says, hey, I'm interested, or I want more information, or they do a personality test online, then that person's contact information goes to the org, and so they can be contacted. So we'd end up with like names, phone numbers, addresses of people, email addresses. And this was like going back to when the org, ever since the org had been open. So it was thousands and thousands of things like that. I mean, a lot of them just bounced and we didn't get any response, but I went through and I emailed promotion. I emailed all sorts of things to these people to try to get responses like that. I was still running book ads online as much as I could. And that was basically what I was doing. And I was researching Facebook.
Yeah.
To see if I could do anything with that. Once, like if I could get okay eventually to do anything on the org's Facebook, then I would know what I was doing, sort of.
And then, so towards the end of that lockdown.
Oh, and then I had surgery in the middle of that, so that was exciting.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. But that was something you pulled in. That was your fault.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. Not only was it something I pulled in, but I better not use it as an excuse for anything else ever again.
That's so insane. And then so towards the end of the lockdown, everything starts opening up again. The org reopens. What happens then? Do you just go back to selling books and doing promo like normal? How did things change?
No, they could only, for a long time, we could only sell books by like calling people or email or contacting people online. It was mostly phone calls, mostly calling people. Then we had contact information far more, using central files to try to contact people. There was a big thing done with the central files, actually, and a lot of calling going on that. And I was doing that for weeks because I couldn't go out and do any promo. So I was calling people. And that was actually another thing that got me wondering, about Scientology because um, it was either you couldn't contact the person at all because it was a wrong number. It was like no way to contact them. And then the people we did contact were mostly like, nope, not interested, not interested, not interested, not interested. And of course, there's this policy of you never stop contacting your central files. Like, you know, like if somebody says I'm not interested, you don't put them in a category in a category that says, okay, they're not interested. People keep calling, keep calling, and keep calling, and keep calling these poor people who say, I'm not interested. And I was like, why are we harassing people that say they're not interested? Just leave them alone. Go find people that are interested or do more promotion or something. It's
But
like
policy says never give up.
Right. Exactly. Which I strongly disagree with. I'm like, if they don't want what we got, leave them alone. You know, if you're trying to, that's why I would never make it in sales. I hate doing sales. It's like, you know, if somebody doesn't want your product, leave them alone.
Yeah.
Don't
And
keep trying.
imagine you get a phone call every week from someone trying to sell you a vacuum cleaner. You don't need a vacuum cleaner. There's never going to be a point where you're going to happily buy the vacuum cleaner. You might eventually be like, okay, you know what? I'll buy it just to shut you up and stop you calling me.
That's
But
right.
you're never going to use it. You're probably going to sell it like you don't want it, and you're going to do it begrudgingly. I don't understand the logic in this policy of Scientology, because even if people do cave in and eventually buy the book, they're not going to read it, and every time they look at it they're going to think, oh god, that was those guys that hounded me until I bought the bloody book, I'm not interested. That's not a good first impression to make on someone.
If they do read it, then they end up, that information ends up in their file, and then the next person who calls them is like, are you reading your book? Come in for a seminar, come in for this, come in for that. And it's just, if I was just under, I had a strong, very strong feelings about this, I would, every day at the end of the day, I would just get more and more and more and more pissed off from trying to call these people that just were not interested. I'm like, just, can we just leave them alone? Like, what's the problem? Like, I didn't say this directly to anybody, but that's what I was thinking. I was just like,
did you ever do anything to kind of push stats or get around them by saying you put up more posters than you did, or, you know, saying you called more people than you did? Was there any sort of manipulation of stats or anything?
I did that towards the end when I was going around in around Ohio State University, because I was talking a lot and I was watching things and I was listening to things, and I would just be like, yeah, I did this many, I just add to it, so it's not like, oh well, you didn't, how come you were out for hours and hours and you didn't do enough? I'm like, you know what, actually I do not care anymore. I need to figure out what I'm doing with my life. So me saying that I did, you know, 20 more posters than I actually did is not hurting anybody. It's really not. It's not going to change my life, that's for sure. Then one other thing I want to say about Central Files is when you're at, like, I was at a management level for 25 years, and then when you come down to you know, the real world sort of, and you interact with people who aren't Scientologists yet, and you're trying to get people interested, and you're calling Central Files yourself and whatever, you start to learn, you start to get the idea of where people are at even more. And management is so disconnected from that. They're so disconnected because their idea is that you call somebody who bought a book in 1985 and you get that person to come into the org. The amount, I think maybe that happened, maybe one time, I think that happened, that somebody actually came in, and it took like hours of like talking to this guy who just wanted somebody to talk to and was lonely and whatever. And someone else, like I talked to him initially, and then someone else in Div 6 talked to him for like several hours and actually got him to come in to do something, and like start a course. But the amount of effort compared to what management thinks is going to happen, oh yeah, if you just get people in the org, they're going to cognite on how great Scientology is, and they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And then when they don't see that happening, they're like, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. The staff are doing something wrong.
The only way we would take someone well, we would never delete anyone's data from central files, but we would put a mark on it and say don't contact, right? The only time we'd ever do that is it happened once. I remember phoning up this guy. Hello, it's Alex from Dianetics London, because it was a book sales thing. We're not calling from the Church of Scientology. I'm calling from Dianetics London. You know, I saw you bought the book 6 years ago. How's it going? And this guy let it rip. He was shouting at me down the phone, you guys keep calling, and every time
Right.
I answer the phone, I tell you, stop calling me. This is harassment, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no problems. We're really sorry. Won't happen again. You said that last week when someone else called me, blah, blah, blah. I would then, there was an option in central files to say like SP or something, or
Yeah,
just,
that's right.
don't
Yeah.
contact.
Yeah, but you
But
can't do that with a large majority of the people. You can't do. I think we couldn't do that unless they actually threatened some sort of legal thing.
yeah, that's the only way that we could
Yeah,
put a mark on them saying don't contact, is if they are like screaming down the phone, really angry and
yeah,
like really aggressive. Other than that, if someone just says, please stop calling me, you phoned me 6 times in the last month, I'm not interested,
yeah.
that's not enough to take them off the files.
That's
It's
right.
absolutely ridiculous.
That's right. And one other thing on that, as far as like the disparagement between what management thinks and what actually occurs, is so you get the idea from going to the events and staff meetings and whatever, and hearing all this like inflated PR about Scientology, and how, people want Scientology. They're looking for answers. They want our technology. They want this. They want that. So then you hear that for years and years when you're at management, and then you come down to a class 5 org and you go out on the streets. And I remember I went around with the brochure for the new org right after we opened, and I was all excited. I was like, yeah, I'm going to show people this beautiful brochure and invite them to come to the building and all this stuff. And I was all enthusiastic, and people want Scientology type thing. And I'd go into a shop and I'd be like, hey, we just opened and you're invited to come in for an open house. And a lot of the times people are like, um thanks, but no. And I was so like, what's going on? Like, I'm like, what's up with the response of people? I thought, like, I'm thinking to myself, like, I thought people wanted Scientology, and you hear people wanted our technology, and they're interested and they're curious. And then you get down and you actually talk to people for real, and they're like, no, I'll pass. Or they're like, no, get the fuck out. So it's just,
How did you justify that in your mind, having been told one thing and seeing it's not the case?
well,
Did you just think, oh, well, these people are just, they don't know that they need Scientology? Or how did you make sense of that in your head?
I sort of made sense of it by thinking that, well, either they're flat out SPs, or they have black PR. Oh, they have a lot of black. They must have black PR. They must have black PR. That kind of thing. Or they just don't know. They don't realize what it is. If they're like being nice about it or whatever, they just don't know. And you have to enlighten them. You have to get them to buy a book, get them to take a personality test, come inside, find out, come to the org, find out about themselves. They just don't know. Or they have black PR.
And
And I
how did
started to
you
get the
handle
idea
it?
that there was a lot of black PR out there that people had seen.
There's more black PR than good PR about
Yeah.
Scientology, right?
Yeah. And then you start checking out what is the so-called black PR. And no, it's just what people actually experienced for real. These things actually happen to people. You're like, black PR. Okay. That's what that's
Yeah.
about.
How did you handle, we used to get this all the time in London, people coming in and just shouting cult, or you believe in Xenu and aliens, and we would have that quite a lot in London. Did you ever come across that, and how did you
Oh
handle
yeah.
it?
Oh yeah. Especially at the games. I grew to hate doing promo at these games because people would just yell at you like flat out. And it was really, it started to be upsetting. You're like, people are just screaming at me. Like, this is not fun. I don't like doing this. I actually got to the point where I'm like, I do not like handing promo to people. I hate doing it. I hate going to these games. I really don't like it. And I remember when, um, after the lockdown thing, the org was opened again and stuff, and things were starting to open up. And I remember my senior was like, wow, we'll be able to do, we should start doing games again. And I'm like, I hate doing games. I think I told her that. She was like, what's your problem? Like, no, I hated it. I didn't mind going to other shops and being like, hey, can I just leave some promotion for a book? Like, I did not want to talk to people about it anymore. It took a lot for me to like force myself to do it. Like when I was on book sales, I had to force myself to talk to people. And I was considered one of the better, you know, booksellers and contact type person. And I hated doing it. Yeah. So, yeah.
I used to love those challenging conversations because having been out of Scientology and hearing the Black PR and the Xenu story and all of this, and then joining Scientology, I was already aware of all of these bad things that are out there and what people would say. And it was one of my favorite conversations to have with public that are coming in to do a tour around the info center or something that want to find out more. They go, oh, what's this I hear about, you know, disconnection or about Xenu or about these culty things that are happening? I would love those conversations because I would be able to level with them and say, I understand. I'm not, firstly, I'm going to disprove what you're saying, because one of the things you think is that Scientologists don't read the internet, they don't know about these things, and they are told not to look at it. Well, firstly, I have read all of that. I know exactly what you're talking about. So that's already disproving what you think. And secondly, I haven't seen anything like it. I haven't seen any Xenu or anything like that. So I would used to love those conversations because it would blow people's minds away that they have an idea in their head of what a Scientologist is, and when they actually come face to face with a person that isn't manipulative, that isn't a horrible person, that is genuinely just trying to help other people, they're just unfortunately under the belief that Scientology is the way to do it. When you're face to face with that person, you suddenly realize, no, they are just an ill-informed person. They are nice people that are just trying to help people.
Yeah, that's the thing that people need to understand too about the people that are in Scientology. They think that they're helping people. People get in because they think that they're really helping people. They're really helping the planet. They don't get in because they want to be nasty to people or they want to do weird things or, you know, find out about aliens or whatever. They get in because they think they think they're helping people, and they want to help people. The vast majority of staff are there for that reason. I have a funny Xenu story. So when I was in the Sea Org, I was working in the data bureau at one point, and you see a lot of information when you're working data. You see all sorts of things that people write in telex and dispatch, whatever. And I came across the term Xenu, right? And I thought, and I don't think I'd ever seen it before. And I thought that I had seen like some squirrel, like OT information that was going to screw me up, right?
You were like, oh my God,
I was like, oh my God, I saw this. I didn't tell anybody, but I was always like, oh my God, I saw this thing. I'm going to be in trouble.
Because they implant in your mind that if you read or come across the information before you're ready in your spiritual journey, you will get pneumonia and die. It sounds silly when you say it like that, but as a Scientologist, you genuinely believe that bad things will happen to you if you come across this information before you're ready. So people are genuinely scared when you come across this information that you didn't mean to.
That's right.
You must have had a bit of feeling of like, oh crap, I'm in trouble now.
Yeah, I did. So I didn't tell anybody for a long time, and then finally I told the MAA about it, and this was one of these people who had trained at Flag, and so I had a whole conversation with her about it, and she told me, like, I just told her that I'd seen something. I didn't tell her what I'd seen because I thought I'd be in more trouble. And she's like, don't tell me what you saw. Just, I got to understand. So then a few years later, she either blew from the Sea Org or she just routed out or whatever. She ended up out of the Sea Org. And because the security chief in ILO happened to be a good friend of mine, he told me that she had actually, while she was at Flag, she somehow got into some of the OT7 materials and read the OT7 materials. And I was like, are you kidding me? So here she is giving me so much shit. I was made to feel so guilty and like I'd like committed a mortal sin for doing this. And meanwhile, she's like reading the binders and flag, and I just see one word, and it's like, oh my god. And I was like,
Did you ever have, that is the thing though, because I don't know if you experienced this, but I would always be, there's this curiosity of wanting to know the next step and
oh
wanting
yeah,
to find out
yeah,
what are the
yeah,
secrets, is it really true, but also being scared that if you find out you'll be injured or whatever. But that if there was an opportunity to find out something I shouldn't know, there's a little bit of curiosity there. I
oh
think
yeah,
everyone has that.
yeah, totally. Like when I was finally able to find out like what all this stuff was, I'm like, okay, there goes the mystery. I feel much better now. It's not like anything that I'm interested in pursuing. Especially
And
when I
do you,
found out like what the clear cognition was. I'm like, that's it? Are you kidding me? Okay, yeah, I'm done. Yeah, I don't need to go in session for hours and hours and hours so that I say that. And actually, even when you do give the cognition, it's not like you're ever told what you just said is the clear cognition. They never tell you what it is. That's what I
they
heard.
just say you're clear now, and you don't
Yeah,
actually know what it is
exactly.
that you said that
And you
means
don't
you're
know what it
clear.
is, what you said. Yeah, that's right.
And unless you train up to become an auditor that can deliver that.
Right, right.
Right. Wow. Do you think that that person who stole or read the OT7 material, do you reckon they actually did that, or do you think that's just something they were telling you to discredit her after she left?
No, no, I think it was true. I think it was true because I was, for some reason, I was talking to him about her because I was still kind of upset about what she said to me and different things like, and it was a few years later and I was telling him about it and I'm like, I'm still kind of upset about this. And because it was very like introverting things that she said.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, let me just tell you something about her. And then he told me, I was like, okay,
Wow.
whatever.
Wow. So going back to our conversation about Div 6
Mhm.
and how things change and selling books and all of that, after the pandemic, um, how were things different? I mean, we've talked previously about things being very different in the world of the Sea Organ Scientology. There's no CMO anymore. Like, there's a lot of structural changes. Did anything happen in light of the pandemic and how the church is run and organized and does things, or did it just end up going back to normal eventually?
No, and I think it's not still not completely back to normal. But as far as in Div 6, we talked about how we did the stress tests and book selling and had tables set up and had people sit down and put them on the e-meter and that whole thing that all the orgs used to do, right? So that completely no, you can't do that anymore. So then it was like, well, how do you sell books on the street then? Like what's the pattern? How do you do it? So what we started doing is we started going into businesses and it started off with doing like a survey, and then that transitioned into ruin finding and then selling them a book. And sometimes we would just go into the business and we'd have a little stack of promo and we're like, oh hey, can we leave this promo in here? And oh, and by the way, do you like to read? Do you like to read books?
That was your intro question. That is how you start. Oh
Yeah,
my god.
it actually did pretty well. And depending on, like, there was one guy who's really good at doing it, and there was another one that was like so and took it a little bit longer. But like the more personable and the more someone's like a sales type person, likes talking to people, whatever, the better they do. So yeah, it would be like, hey, do you like to read? Have you ever heard of this book? And you show them the book and they're like, and they're either like yes or no or whatever. And you just kind of develop the conversation from there and talk about the book and maybe ask them like, is there anything in your life that's really stopping you or holding you back or whatever. You can find out how to handle that in this book. And there was a whole pattern that we did from that.
So you still did the stress test just without the e-meter. You were
Yeah,
still trying to
that's
find
yeah,
their ruin.
basically, yeah, without the meter. And of course we were wearing masks and gloves, even though nobody in the world wore gloves except for like medical people while they're doing surgeries. But
Wow.
yeah.
That's hilarious. And so after that, did you end up going back and doing stress tests again, or was it just kind
Not
of
while I
forever
was
different?
there. No, not
Okay,
while I was there. They were not able to do that yet.
interesting.
Okay, you want to see something? Okay, this totally doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about.
Go on.
But since everyone loves to talk about Shelly and where's Shelly and David Miscavige and BS like this, right? Okay, so this is the last. So there used to be Christmas cards that they would send out. I mean, there's still Christmas cards. They do Christmas cards every year. So, and the cards used to say, from David and Shelly. So this is the card that we received in the year 2000 from David and Shelly. So it goes like this.
Wow.
David and Shelly. There you go.
Oh my
I
word.
still have it.
I love that you still have that.
That's funny, huh? But that was the last one that we got that had her name on it. That's why I'm bringing it up. And that was in the year 2000.
So all the ones after that just said
All the
from
ones after that, no, you never. I'm almost positive that you didn't see Shelly.
and that dates back to 2000. So that's before the whole "Where's Shelly? She's gone missing" thing, right?
Yeah. So maybe she was already starting to not be in good graces or whatever. Because I'm pretty sure there was, maybe there was, but I specifically remember this one because it said David and Shelly.
Interesting. Wow. Well, Katherine, thank you so much for your time again today. Is there anything you wanted to speak about that we haven't covered already today?
Not in this one, but we can think of something for next time.
Yeah, I really like doing this. We should do this as a weekly thing if you're up for it. I'd be down to do a regular video with you, and hopefully very soon I'm hoping to be able to start doing live, so we could do like a live Q&A with people commenting and asking questions and stuff. So for those of you watching, sit tight for that, and we'll organize it. But
and if I don't know, people can put in the comments or whatever, but if people want me to tell my story again, I can, because I know on Chris's channel we used a lot of inside baseball nomenclature, and I'm sure there was a lot of terms that people didn't understand or they just were not tracking. So I could tell my story again, and people want to see it, they just say in the comments if they want to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Leave a comment below with any questions you've got, and we can go through them and maybe do a whole video of just questions for me and you to answer together. So that would be really interesting for next week.
Okay, good.
All right, thank you so much, Katherine. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Alex.